Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to the Tech Meetup. This is sponsored by Kontent.ai. And today we've got a fabulous topic regarding designers working with developers and how the journey of pretty much how web and application development starts, and the processes and almost the learnings that people come through and go through with those. So great topics that we got today. Just a little bit about me and who am I? I'm Ilesh Mistry. I'm the founder and organizer of the Tech Meetup. I'm a senior front-end engineer and a Kontent.ai MVP. If you need to kind of contact me, then just use the QR code on the right-hand side. A little bit about the Tech Meetup. So generally, they are front-end driven topics and tend to have them like every month or every couple of months. If you would like to know more about that, then just follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter. And also if you know there's a different topic that you have that's really good to kind of have in one of the sessions, or know someone who wants to speak, or even want to sponsor the event, then get in touch. A little bit about one of our sponsors, Kontent.ai. They're basically a headless CMS that enables organizations to govern all their content. So pretty much similar to a lot of the headless CMS out there, but they've got great integrations with AI as well. If you want to kind of like get in contact with them, then there's a few QR codes on the right-hand side. They are recruiting as well. So if you're looking to kind of change careers, then by all means, get in touch. Just a few things before we get started on the main sessions. Add your questions into chat. We'll obviously be recording this event. So, should you have to kind of leave at certain points, that's not a problem. You can catch the recording afterwards. If you can share it on social media, that's awesome. And also, you've got a chance to win some meetup swag. So this is the swag that you can win. So you can get like a nice hoodie and some bottles. I'll share this sort of like QR code during the sessions anyway, but by all means, there's just a couple of short questions to answer, and then you could have a chance to win the merchandise. But the main thing we're here is to go through these fabulous sessions. So today's agenda is going to be more focused regarding designers and how they work with developers. And first off, we're going to have Kultar, who's going to be talking about breaking barriers between the design and development processes. Then we've got James after that, who's going to be talking about his sort of journey between, creating digital products and crafting them and doing lots with that and changing from designer to developer and also to everything else that he's done. Then we've got Sean after that, who's going to be talking about a design version of a hackathon, which is, you normally hear the coding side or, the developers talking about it, but it's great to see a different perspective. Then Dominika at the end will wrap us up with bridging the gap between the UX side and the developers within the CMS platform, Kontent.ai. So awesome topics here. And obviously remember to add your questions in the chat. And what I'm going to do is just going to stop sharing and then hand over to Kultar. Just let me know when you're ready.
Cool. Bear with me for 1 second. Share my screen. Go on presentation mode and rock and roll. Can you see that all right?
Yes.
Cool. So my topic, breaking barriers between designers and developers. Quick introduction about me and who I am. I am Kultar. I'm a designer. So I've been working in the design industry for over 18 years. That's across freelance, in-house, startup, and agency side. My skill set spans across logo, brand, print, digital, UX, UI, prototyping, data analysis, and much more. I've also worked up to a point where I've been managing and leading teams, running workshops, and getting involved with strategy. I can code, so I can code XHTML and CSS to a pretty high standard, and I can hack, PHP and JavaScript as well as the next one. So that's always handy. I'm actively involved in coaching and mentoring in my own hours via ADP List, giving back to the design community. I also do photography, do a lot of reading, writing, running, and to switch off away from design, I watch a lot of movies, collect trainers, and go traveling. I'm also a dad of two, just to kind of throw that in there as well. So yeah, pretty hectic schedule. Now, designers and developers working together, it's a bit of an age-old tale. It's been around since, as far back as I can remember. Maybe not the dawn of the ages, but maybe around about this time when kind of design started to really pick up and became more demanding. Or maybe around about here where the same applies for coding, when technology, as we know, advances so much, and around about the time when coding or technology is uh, weaved into digital products and is becoming more demanding day to day, and it's more than one person could deliver. It needs a team of people to deliver a certain end product, and that team requires a certain different set of skills. So as far back as I can remember in my career, I've always had to connect and deal with developers and work with developers to deliver an end product. So from then until now, how can designers and developers work better together? And I'm sure if you Google how can designers and developers collaborate together, there's a ton of articles out there. But I found it's the same old spiel, to be honest, about how they should communicate more, and designers should design for developers in mind, and so on and so forth. And that's all great. It's all progressive, but it doesn't really go into the nitty-gritty about the details about what you should communicate, or how you in your day-to-day role can bridge or break certain barriers that are in place to help do that. So hopefully I'm going to touch on a little bit of that and highlight some of that today, and what you can do on your day-to-day role to think about the other person and how to collaborate better. So how can designers and developers work better together? That's right. That is a picture of Breaking Bad. They should break bad. Now, bear with me, because this is where I go left, because I like to do things a little bit differently and shake things up. So I'm going to break down my train of thought. So I'm sure there's someone out there thinking, what has Breaking Bad got to do with designers and developers working together? I'm sure there's a better way of presenting it. And I'm sure there's people out there saying, I've not seen Breaking Bad. And isn't that about a man who gets diagnosed and starts to go on a tangent making and selling drugs? Yes, it is. But again, bear with me and I'll explain my train of thought. So yes, it is one of the best TV shows ever made. Preferences aside, whether you've seen it or not, it's won a ton of awards, all the rest of it. But if you take some of the contextual points out, it tells a great story. And why does it tell a great story? It connects emotionally with viewers. And it is about two different people coming together from two different worlds, solving problems, overcoming obstacles, and making a product that effectively impacts their market. Now, when you say it like that, it sounds good. It sounds like the designers and developers kind of ideal scenario when you say it like that. So I wanted to play on that a little bit more, and I wanted to explore that a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight how designers and developers can work together, but using Breaking Bad as an analogy. It's a little bit different, it's a bit more entertaining, and is better than just having a list of things that you should do to help you day to day. The beautiful thing about this is you won't need to have seen the show to get it. But if you have, you'll appreciate these Easter eggs a little bit more. So let's dive straight in, and hopefully it doesn't take too long. First up is chemistry in collaboration. There's no way around it. Designers and developers, if you're working in the digital space, you will have to work together at some point during that project lifecycle. So that is a first and foremost. There's no getting away with it. Some designers will probably like to think that they don't need to, or they just do their bit and then hand over. And same goes for developers. They probably think they just need to develop what they need to develop and then move on. But you're going to have to work together. Now, I'm a firm believer of this quote. It resonates with me a fair while, and a fair bit, because in this day and age, when you're trying to churn out new things are advancing quite rapidly, and demands and deadlines are fast. Things come and go all the time. So if you want to move fast and bash something out, yeah, fine, do it on your own. But if you truly want to make something that goes far or stands the test of time and is of high quality, then you need a right team. You need to pick that team together, like I said earlier, with the right skill sets, and together through that collaborational process, you can go farther and go together. So this one is quite apt for now. And using Walter White and Jesse Pinkman as in this scenario as our developer and designer, we know they come from two different backgrounds. We know they have two different ways of communicating, working. They'd have two different complete sets of priorities. But what makes them an effective team? What makes them go good together? First and foremost, they respect each other's craft. They respect the boundaries. So that needs to be done. Sometimes you can work. Some people can think that one is more important than the other. And even if it comes first or second, it's not the case. Design and development are two highly skilled career and skill sets that need to work together in order to, they're two cogs as part of a bigger machine. So getting on the same page as each other is quite important. So it's just, in the big scheme of things, you're an end user is not going to care whether about design or development. They just want the end product. It almost needs to be invisible sometimes. So working as part of a team is the first thing that needs to happen. So getting that collaboration going, resolving problems together, and tackling each strength and weakness and playing off each other. You only know that by collaborating with the other team member, the designer and the developer. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit further on as well. So once design and development work together, a good design with a great code base is essentially the foundation for the rest of the delivery that gets built upon it. So marketing, SEO, and all the other things that make a good end product get built upon that as well. So it's essential that those two are connected from the off. And that goes regardless of whatever environment you're in, whether that's waterfall, agile, in-house, freelancer, camper van, or super lab. You need to work together and make sure that that's solid. But what does good collaboration look like? So we know that you're going to collaborate at some point, but what does good collaboration look like? What are some of these barriers, and how can we remove those? That leads me to my next point, which is cooking up ideas together. So first and foremost, when you're coming together, respecting each other's craft, egos and alter egos get left at the door, simply because ego will hinder the collaboration process. If you have one person thinking that they know better, or they're more experienced, you're automatically going into a situation without a growth mindset, and you're not open to approaching things in different ways. And quite often that's quite key, because a developer will want to approach something in one way and a designer may approach something in another way, and both refusing to compromise. So again, for that same fact. So coming together, leaving egos at the door, just makes the process go a hell of a lot more smoothly. And getting involved early is a major key. So no one ever likes to get told what to do or when they should do it. No one really likes a hand grenade over the fence. I know as a designer, I don't like that. I want to get involved as early on as possible, and I can get to know the problem, the situations, the variables, the client, the users. The earlier the designer gets involved, the better. But the same goes for the developer, I'm sure. Rather than having a design that gets signed off and then thrown over the fence to a developer, here you go, this is what you're building, off you go. Get developers involved earlier. So designers, if you're doing your design, stop, grab a developer and say, this is what I'm doing, what do you think? Because quite often designers will approach things with a blue sky mentality, whereas a developer is more on the ground trying to deliver that, so they're a bit more feasible and realistic on in their approach. But once you start to work together and pull each other in, you'll approach things in different ways. Oh, I've designed this in a certain way, but maybe if you do it like that, it'll be better to code, for example. You only get that by initiating that collaboration. You only get to cook up ideas by initiating that collaboration. And you also quite quickly, when you approach problems together, resolve the tech versus user priorities, because there will be a scenario and you'll have to decide, is it a user experience or is it a technology priority, which comes up quite often. Now, thinking back over my past, the best case examples of working on a design and an end product is when I've done a design and it's gone over through to the developers, but the developers pull me back. So it works both ways, even during development as well. So when designers are bringing developers in to help create, do design decisions, the vice versa scenario is developers need to pull designers back in, because there will be scenarios where they're going to be left on their own and they need to get some design advice. It goes back to that quote where I said, do you want to go in the right direction slower together or 100 miles an hour in separate directions? Because it does happen quite often. Once you know each other in terms of ways of working and your priorities and you've built that trust with that developer, and designers and developers working together, you get on the same page in terms of same work ethic and same energy, because at the end of the day, you're a team, and that's really important. If a designer comes on board to a project and does an absolutely mind-blowing design, really, really great, really high energy during the day, but then hands it over to a developer who is not really bothered about the end outcome, it's gonna go nosedive down. And equally, vice versa, if you have a designer who's like, oh, I can't be bothered with this design, and then you have a developer on that same team who's shouting, woo, first thing in the morning, or doing star jumps on their stand-ups, then that same energy is going to be off. Then by the time they get that mediocre design, they're going to be, a little bit flat. So getting to know the developer, being on the same page, having the same work ethic, having the same energy will help in creating a higher quality end product. That goes even more so if you're remotely, because in this day and age, remote working is everywhere. You can be working with the developer on the other side of the world. And yes, that is more challenging. But at the end of the day, technology and remote collaboration now is better than it's ever been. So that additional energy and effort is going to be needed by you, the designer, by you, the developer, to connect, cover that common ground, and get on that same mentality, because that's all it is at the end of the day. And by doing so, by getting together and effectively having a good relationship and a good collaboration, that could be infectious to the rest of the team. Now, we all know a good leader is someone who empowers a collaborative environment, but even more so, a good collaborative relationship will influence the rest of the team around you. So if you have a good designer and developer working together, bouncing each other's ideas off, you're going to spread that with the rest of the team. So other people are going to be project managers, or other team members will be like, these guys work really well together. They, they know each other's strengths, they know each other's boundaries, and they just get on and they get it. Why can't we be like that? And you'll quickly find that a collaborative relationship can quite easily influence a collaborative environment. And then once that is there, you can help spark creativity in others and get out of the box when problem solving. Next up, communication. Now, everyone talks about communication. That's the way to increase collaboration and all the rest of it. Communication is key. Going back to my last point, that shoulder tap mentality, bringing people in, is quite key. So don't feel like you should. You don't wait for someone to tell you, right, go and speak to a developer or go and speak to a designer. You should be doing it off of your own back. Go off and be the person who knocks. I regularly go in and check in with developers, even though they might go away and be busy in their build. I'd rather a developer ask me 10 times and then go away and execute once than do it the other way around. And I'm the same. I'll ask someone 10 times so I can go away and be more efficient and work smarter. So don't wait for someone to allow you to speak. Go ahead and be proactive. Show some initiative. Better collaboration. At the end of the day, better communication equals better collaboration. And if you're addressing things earlier and together, you'll quite often find that you'll get better results as well. An important factor as well is developers, when sitting down to code on a project, will quite often come across challenges and scenarios further down the road that are not really foreseen by anybody else. And it's true, sometimes designers can miss some details. Sometimes developers can look at a design and misunderstand what's there. And that's where the communication and the collaboration is quite key. So you can remove uncertainty. So quite often there's scenarios where a design has been done, it goes into development, and post-design tweaks are required. Once it's working in a browser or on a phone, there might be tweaks that are maybe needed to the design. Designers can't foresee everything. There may be some details missed. So it's important that feedback loop is constantly happening. Developers also can, if they're being brought into a project earlier and being brought into the design phase, they get to ask why. So developers, please ask designers why. Why have you done this? Why have you done it like that? There's so much design strategy that goes on into a design. Designers can bore you to death with golden ratios and Hicks laws and all the rest of it, and they probably try not to. But if you want to know why, to understand what they've done and why they've done it, that will help you become a better developer, or help you when you're building something, by understanding some of the strategy and the thought process that's gone into what is essentially an image on a screen. And again, approaching things together, you can quite easily decide then what is important. Is it a tech solution, or is it a user experience solution that needs to be resolved? getting together, speaking, open communication channels, better collaboration equals a better outcome. And like I said earlier, you're effectively addressing problems earlier, which can quite often later cause an issue. So if you're addressing these earlier, it's less surprises further down the line. You're less likely to be caught with your pants down like that. Classic Walter White. Handoff, the Heisenberg handoff. So Heisenberg, Fringe, Mike, all these characters in Breaking Bad, they were known for their thoroughness and high quality for execution. So the same goes for when the design and the develop gets signed off and it goes into handoff mode for developers. So designers, if in doubt, spell it out. If you need to think about it or explain it, then have it there ready for documented. Prepare files for handover. So because designers are effectively stakeholders for developers. So the handoff should be detailed. It should be a balance of precision and adaptability, but also change, because like I said earlier, there may be post-design tweaks. So it needs to be easily adaptable in future scenarios as well. And again, it goes both ways. Developers, what do you need in this handover? Tell the designer so they can have that prep. Do you need a 100-page document outlining spacing, padding, and pixels and everything else, because that can be done? Or do you just want the bare bones and be left alone to kind of get something fleshed out? Tell designers what you need or how you need it, and they can then have that prepped. If there's something missing, tell them. Do you want micro interactions broken down and visualized as well? Do you need a link for the similar scenarios, that code pens that are online? Do you want the handoff in pixels or REMs? Because all of this can quite easily be done. You just need to tell designers how you want it. And that will effectively help you hit the ground running quicker. Fortunately, most design tools have inspection modes and developer tools built in. So are you using these, or do you find you work better just on the naked eye and have it, and with basic style guides? Tell designers, so then designers can then utilize what they need, what they need and what you need to make a greater end product. It's never an over the fence job. No one's throwing hand grenades. As I pointed out earlier, everything that we're doing is breaking down barriers to remove the fence so you can work together. And if something is missing, you can go back and ask for it. It's always a learning experience as well. So you're not going to get it right the first time. It's going to happen over multiple projects and over multiple tries. No half measures. So companies like Airbnb, Uber, Monzo, even Avion are prime examples of how a product with good continuous iteration, UX, design, and development coming together can make a really, really good impact, and even go on to disrupt markets as well. So design and development, like I said earlier, are two small but very important cogs in a very, very big machine. Done right, it can make a very, very big dent and is a good foundation to build on. A good design with poor development is a bad outcome. A bad design with good development is still a bad outcome. They are salvageable, but again, an end user is not going to care. So it's our duty and our job to make sure that a good high quality design and a good quality coded product comes together and is invisible and plays that role well. So don't wait for permission. Don't wait for to be told. Go, knock, be curious, ask 10 times, cook once, make sure that that collaborative relationship between design and development is there, and it's up to you to remove the barrier, essentially, is what I'm saying. Once those barriers are away, you can then crack on with what you need to be doing. So like Breaking Bad, like the characters, you're coming together to make an end product. So break bad and create good together. That's my presentation. Any questions?
Thanks, Kultar. Do you have any questions for Kultar?
Oh, just a comment, really. I think we talk a lot about this handover, right? But I think we should be aiming for more of a handshake, right? Working together continually. I think that's the problem that we face, and it kind of creates this divide between us that it is considered a handoff, okay, and then we go and work on the next thing, and they go off and do that thing. It's it's a tricky one.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's why I always say it's never a hand grenade. It should be, you should be pulling me back in, and I should be pulling you in earlier. So it's quite a fine line sometimes, especially if a designer, for example, has moved on to do another project, especially when you're working in an agile environment as well. So it's a fine act to balance, but it's definitely more of a handshake than a handover, for sure.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess just to follow on to that, like, what would you suggest would be like something that you can provide like a handover towards the developers? So like in some cases you can give designs that can almost be exported out with HTML or CSS, but what would be your recommendations on this?
It completely depends on the context of the team, the tools, and the environment. So, for example, most design software, Figma, InVision, and Sketch, they are all designed with a high-end prototype in mind, where you can switch to even Adobe XD, where you switch to developer mode, and you can go in and you can see the design and the code behind the design. So it's breaking down the design in elements for the code. So if a designer is using software such as that, you can speak to developers to see if they're utilizing it, and if not, then you can quite easily put a style guide together for some of the things that aren't translated in some of those things, like some of the micro interactions and some of the nitty-gritty details as well, and animations and hover over effects. But most of these tools nowadays do all of that, so you can actually spend the time to illustrate that within the prototype.
Thanks. And then I've got one other question, is like, what sort of challenges do you face as a designer, especially when it comes to things like, accessibility, and, things are changing all the time, AI is coming in, like, what sort of things are you guys like, thinking, I need to watch?
That's a good question. So accessibility, there's a ton of plugins and there's a ton of software online as well that you can use to ensure that design is compliant with WAG guidelines. So color contrast ratios, even in some of the design thinking, if you're involved in earlier stages. So within UX design, when you're wireframing or prototyping, you can quite easily design content in a certain way that makes it a lot more accessible. So, for example, carousels and things like that are a nightmare, or ensuring that screen readers are going to read content in a way that's correct and sustainable as well. And more importantly, once you've done something, put it out there to users to see what they say, and make sure accessibility is one of the things that are factored in. And then highlight that in the build, because a lot of accessibility, in design, it's achievable, making things color contrast compliant, but a lot of it is detailed in the code and how it's translated in the code as well. So just because I have an image on a design, it doesn't tell you that you have to have an alt tag on it. For example, you just kind of assume it's going to have that. Just a hypothetical scenario. But yeah, there's so much that needs to be translated in the code of the design to make sure that it stays compliant all the way. And there's a ton of plugins, accessibility tools that you can use to ensure that your code and your design meet those requirements as well. So we use that. I use that a fair bit whenever I'm rolling out a design, it's always a factor in the background.
Great, thanks. Any other questions for Kultar? If not, we can move over to James. Thanks, Kultar. Great presentation. James, just give us a shout when you're ready.
Yep, no problem. Can you see that all right?
Yep.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, thanks, Ilesh. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me along. It's nice to see some familiar faces. And yeah, good job, Kultar. I love the Breaking Bad reference. I was giggling along with the, especially with the yo on that slide. So yeah, nice work. Okay, let's crack on. So I want you to imagine a student that is studying music at university. They're obsessed with becoming a professional musician, and they're fascinated by all of the aspects that a pop or jazz band need to be successful. So they set out to learn it all. They start with the instruments: guitar, piano, drums, bass guitar, obviously, harmonica, percussion, singing. And then their interests move into recording and music production. They learn about microphones and different recording environments, and studio gear and mixing and mastering, and much more. Within 5 years, the student is good at all of these things. They're just not great at any of them. And that student was me. And that is effectively how I've lived my life, and it's how I'm wired. And my career has played out in exactly the same way. In 2014, I got my first job as a web designer when mobile apps were really taking off. So I designed lots of them. And then I got bored. And next, I had to learn to code. I needed to be able to create web applications. So I slowly learned JavaScript and got my first job as a developer. And from here, I became more technical and I learned infrastructure and architecture. And then I managed products and people. But I was never, and I still am not, a master at designing, writing code, architecture, infrastructure, managing products or people. I just tried to make it work. So I typically get fidgety working on a single thing for too long. And I need to be challenged. And I would say that I generally prioritize width of knowledge over depth. So if this resonates with you, then you are, like me, a jack of all trades. And of course, a master of none. But that is not all bad. In fact, I think that is a potential superpower in the first phases of building and launching digital products. So let's explore that. Let's start with a definition. So what is a jack of all trades? A jack of all trades is a colloquial term used to describe a person who possesses a wide range of skills and knowledge across various fields or disciplines, rather than specializing in a single specific area. Where did this term even come from? Well, the history isn't completely clear, to be honest, but it's thought that a jack was just another way to refer to a very average person. So thanks for that. It's almost like we might say average Joe today. So this denotes that a jack of all trades was potentially seen as lower than a specialist or someone that's highly talented in a single area. In a sense, it was probably actually an insult. A more modern approach to defining a jack of all trades might be to draw a spectrum where knowledge is plotted from generalist to specialist. And if you start looking into the field, there are indeed some more complex models that add a lot more nuance to this conversation. You might have heard of the term polymath. And although there isn't a true consensus on what a polymath is, I think it's a way to refer to someone with a wide and deep set of knowledge. And I think this is a really rare person. And I don't actually think this is what a jack of all trades is. In my view, a jack of all trades is someone that values width or breadth of knowledge over depth. So let's look at some of the positive aspects of being a jack of all trades. A jack of all trades will not be able to restrain their curiosity. As any new detail is revealed to them, they will feel completely compelled to explore the topic and to attempt to gain some level of proficiency in it. And I think this curiosity leads to some level of innovation. When solving problems, a jack of all trades will naturally shift to the slightly cringeworthy term of first principles thinking, often heading to the questions of why rather than jumping to how. A jack of all trades will be able to pick up new skills in new areas relatively fast. Their brain will make relatively fast jumps due to that kind of built up cross-disciplinary learning that they've been used to doing. And a jack of all trades has the ability to quickly change direction when the path isn't leading anywhere. They will try something new without kind of, holding on too dearly to previous decisions. So how does this map to building digital products? Well, it turns out that we need wide-ranging skill sets for this, as Kultar mentioned. And when you first start any product or venture, you will likely be tackling a lot of this stuff on your own or in very, very small teams. So let's take a look at some of these basic elements. And just to flag that this is nowhere near an exhaustive list. It's just some of the things that came to my head. So we've got the technical skills. Obviously, we've got some designers here today. Visual design, making things look great, stunning if possible. User experience and interaction design. How do we make cohesive experiences? And in my opinion, even more important, how do we make familiar experiences to users? Then there's coding and logic. How can you actually build something and bring it to life, make it work? There's data analysis. Can we access the data, query the data, but not only that, gain some insight from looking at it? There's infrastructure and cloud. How do we take our application and put it on a platform so it is available to the world and is also somewhat stable? There's many, many soft skills, but these are two that I think are really important. So a level of communication. Can we write and speak with purpose and nuance and clarity? And do we have humbleness? Are we able to just pick up any job that needs doing without ego being an issue? Then there's the commercial side of it. And again, this is just a very, very small subset, but we've got to think about the market or the markets, which by my definition is just potential pools of customers and where you're actually going to find them. And then there's the distribution. How are people actually going to find your product? And what are the channels that you're going to distribute through? Then there's your sales strategy. How are you going to go out and find prospects and find people that have the problem that you solve? And then how are you going to help them buy whatever you've built? And there's the elusive marketing and brand, which is how you're seen and perceived by the outside world. And again, there's many operational aspects, but these are two that certainly caught me out. There's the financial. How are you going to make revenue and stay afloat as a very, very small venture? And then there's the legal side of it. Do you actually understand how your business operates within the constraints of you and where you're located, but also your customer or your customers, which is particularly difficult in a digital world because they can be anywhere on the planet. So we can see here that there's like a wide gamut of things that are needed when you first approach building and launching something into the world. And I believe that you, as a jack of all trades, if you are one, have an advantage here, at least initially. But being a jack of all trades comes with some costs. A jack of all trades will easily be distracted and they'll lose focus when they need to complete a single task. If you keep pushing a jack of all trades on their explanations, they'll eventually hit a barrier where their knowledge just abruptly stops, which is quite embarrassing. A jack of all trades battle with this constant imposter syndrome, particularly in professional environments. And this is definitely not unique to this type of person by any means, but it is very typical and will need to be managed. And every jack of all trades will come to a realization that they can't tackle everything. And in fact, you'll become less and less effective over time as you take on more jobs and responsibilities. So at some point, a jack of all trades will need to learn to let go. And instead of trying to do everything, they need to learn to enable other people and teams. So to be successful long term, we need to work in diverse teams where all skill sets and ideas are encouraged. I'm sure this is obviously not a surprise to anyone. So to make the next step in their journey, a jack of all trades needs to embrace collaboration. We all know by now that the best teams are tightly synced and communicate basically effortlessly, particularly across those different skill sets. So in my opinion, there are two broad areas that allow you to communicate better with each other and across other disciplines. And that is empathy and insight. Empathy is your ability to understand and share the emotions and perspectives of another person. And this first involves actively listening to what they're saying, which means not allowing your brain to think of yourself at every opportunity. It also means holding back that thing you desperately wanted to say and learning to just let it go. A deceivingly difficult way to empathize with anyone is to genuinely put yourself in their shoes. As you pretend to be that person, try to understand how they feel and how what you're saying will come across to them. Try to be attuned to their emotional state and actually acknowledge what they're feeling. All of these things are easy to say and hard to do, and it takes practice and reflection and being introspective. So when you're looking to empathize with another person or a group, try to answer these questions. What makes them feel confident? And what makes them feel nervous? And what are their biggest fears? And what are their top goals? And finally, how should I approach giving feedback to this person or group? Once you can emotionally communicate with other people, you should aim to gain some insight of their discipline. This means channeling that inner jack of all trades by trying to achieve a width of knowledge in their chosen area. So how you approach gaining insights for a specific area obviously depends on the area, but here's a few ideas to get you started. Read 20 highly rated Medium articles on the topic. Attempt to do one small aspect of their job, like building something simple or sending out some cold emails. Watch 10 dependable YouTube videos on the topic. Join a relevant Slack community and engage with people. Or last resort, use AI. So I want to be clear here that the idea is not to become a master of the topic, and watching 10 YouTube videos about vaccination gives you zero credibility in the field of epidemiology. But our goal here is to be able to converse better and collaborate across different disciplines in the context of building digital products. And I think this gets us far enough. Once you have a broad understanding of the area, you can start to map out some of the technical aspect of the group's area of expertise. And then you can fill in your knowledge gaps over time. So I like a mind map for this. So let's just take the example of designers, trying to communicate better with developers. So from initial research, you might find out that there are some overall themes that development encapsulates. We've got languages, programming languages, platforms, testing, software, just general considerations and opinions. And then you can branch out on each of these themes and think how this applies to who you're communicating with and your team. So, what languages are we using and why are we using them? What platforms are we deploying to and why does that matter? How are we approaching testing and what's the general consensus on testing in the development community? What types of software do our team use and why do we use it? Are there any other considerations that you can bring to the table that you've seen that we don't discuss, we don't talk about, whether that's accessibility or code readability, if you have an opinion on that, or performance? And finally, look into the opinionated topics, because this is generally where people get the most heated. In the case of development, there's frameworks and patterns and styles, but that's not all of them, of course. So in conclusion, if you are a jack of all trades, then you should own it. And you may constantly question yourself on your lack of drive to learn things in great detail. But you should also understand that it does come with some advantages. You can move freely across boundaries. You can make a fast impact. And with that said, you should understand your shortcomings, which is that you can't do it all forever. So collaboration, particularly with specialists, is essential. As a jack of all trades, your abilities are best suited to tasks that require width of knowledge and adaptability and speed, as opposed to depth of knowledge, deep understanding and patience. So work on cross-functional tasks, but work with specialists as soon as you need that deep expertise. Jack of all trades excel in synthesizing information from different domains, connecting the dots and finding creative solutions to problems. However, it's essential to just recognize when to collaborate. The longer you continue to take all the tasks by yourself, the harder it is to hand the reins to somebody else. So get used to this early and think about collaborating and empowering people in a way that makes them successful. Be empathetic to their way of working and encourage it. There are always going to be new tools to help people collaborate. With designers and developers, we've got things like Figma's dev mode and all the stuff that Kultar mentioned within design apps and Zeppelin. But to me, what's more important is learning the skills to collaborate with different types of people that have different skill sets. And this requires human interaction. So a good starting point, in my opinion, is working on your empathy and your insight. And that's it. Thanks very much for listening to my talk and self-therapy session. So I'm James Sear. And if you want to chat about anything that I've mentioned today, or just generally about building products, then you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just quick plug of my product. So I'm the co-founder of Avion. Thanks for the mention, Kultar, much appreciated. Definitely not in the right crowd there, Airbnb and Uber. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'm the co-founder of Avion. We help teams build products that matter to their users, and we save waste by providing better prioritization of features. It's like the perfect planning environment, which is done in the form of user story maps, which I think are a hugely underrated way to craft and plan your backlog and your roadmap. So if you're interested in learning more about that, then just send me a message. Obviously open to any questions, but otherwise over to you, Ilesh.
Thank you. Are there any questions for James? If not, I've got one. Kultar, go for it. Yeah.
What have you found to be the most difficult? Being a jack of all trades, first and foremost, you clearly have great skill in all of those areas you mentioned. And what have you found the hardest to let go over and hand over?
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, I don't do any development work anymore, and I haven't done for a while. I mean, when I say I don't do any, I do some, but I don't really do core development work on the product, which was, there was obviously a level that was difficult to give up that work, because I had, been part of building that from the ground up. But actually, you kind of come to realize that there's so many other fruitful things that you can be working on. So to be honest, by the time I kind of stopped working on that, it wasn't so bad to just stop doing it. So I'm not sure there's been anything that's hard to give up. I think just the nature of being a jack of all trades is that you're actually okay with just like moving on to something else and just picking it up. But yeah, there's still that constant fear that you're not actually good enough at all the things that you're picking up, which is just one of those things you have to kind of deal with on an ongoing basis, really.
Great. I've got one question, similar to Kultar's, but just slightly different variation, in the sense that, do you find it super hard to then pick up other areas of things that you might be part of this jack of all trades? So something new comes out, and do you need to like invest time away from what you're doing to kind of get into that new tech or new AI's out, basically? Do you find that that's something that you need to invest some time into, kind of consider for your product and obviously the journey of what you're doing right now?
Yeah. I think with regard to kind of being just interested in tech and being, I guess, seduced by new tech, I think that definitely used to be a major problem for me, and that's something that I've worked on to not be like that, not be jumpy at new tech. But I think with regard to, if you look at the macro picture of building a business, like you always need to be assessing that stuff, because everything's shifting from under your feet the whole time. So when a massive like ground sort of swell of AI comes in, of course that has to come into your considerations, not from what it used to be was, how can I learn how to build stuff with AI, how can I learn all the tech and the frameworks, whereas now I would approach that with what is actually what's useful in AI and how could that apply to the people that we're serving? Can we actually solve a problem with this? So I tried to come at it from probably a slightly different angle than I would have done beforehand. But there's always that temptation. There's always that temptation to just dive into something new. And occasionally I will just spend quite a few evenings trying stuff out like that. But yeah, less and less during the day anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree with the AI stuff. It's better to embed it, use it and not sort of like use it as a thing that's going to be a competitor. It's more like embracing it and working with it and how it can help your clients and stuff like that. So it makes sense.
Definitely.
Cool. If there's any more questions, please shout out. If not, next up will be Sean. Thanks, James.
Cheers.
Those descriptions there of a jack of all trades sound remarkably like an introverted ADHD sufferer. Both the PowerPoints and the negative points, but I think they're kind of hidden superpowers actually. And Kultar's comment there around jack of all trades. I don't think it's necessarily a master of none. I think you can be a master of some, particularly if you've got years of experience in some of those things, right? But yeah, very interesting. Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen and start presenting. Okay, so I'm Sean Johnson. I'm an experienced design lead at a place called MMT, which I'm sure I know some of you are very familiar with. I don't have an introductory slide, unfortunately, but when Kultar was reading out his, it's pretty much verbatim. So just skip back and have a look at that and just imagine it's all about me. So yeah, I want to talk about a thing called design sprints, which I'm sure most of you have probably heard about. I did want to kind of liken it to or compare it with hackathons, which we've done both at MMT, and I've had quite a bit of experience of both throughout my years. But I was kind of leaning towards hackathons being that thing that developers do, right? They get loads of pizza in and packets of Doritos and Coke and just beaver away for a weekend under locked doors and come out with some code at the end. But I didn't want to offend anybody because I do enough of that in my day job. So I'm going to jump straight into the design sprint alternative and hopefully you can liken it to it. So for those not aware, I mean, just a sort of whistle stop tour basically. Design Sprint is a 5-day process for solving big problems and testing ideas. It was developed at Google Ventures, basically popularized in this book by a guy called Jake Knapp and a couple of his colleagues. And it comes around this idea of, when we work in lean, we've all heard about lean product cycles and lean delivery, where we have an idea, we want to build something, then launch it, and then we want to learn from that, and then it feeds back in, and we have this kind of iterative circle, but problems get in the way of that. Things like teams having pressure to be innovative, but they've got no idea where to start. Cross-functional teams finding it hard to align on common business objectives. Teams that often work towards unclear goals as project scope keeps changing. I know we've all experienced that before, right? And then teams lack any real data on which to base business decisions on. So they end up having endless discussions and conversations and then meetings because that meeting didn't actually solve the thing, and it goes on and on. So you kind of get this happening where the build cycle gets pushed out more and more. And then in some cases, it gets pushed out that far that you probably don't even get to launch, right? I know I've certainly experienced some projects where we don't get to launch, probably a budget gets pulled or they pivot or something happens and we get swiped and put onto another project and we don't actually get to launch it to learn from it. So the idea of the design sprint is that we remove the build and learn phase and just focus on this, have an idea and let's test it and learn it from it and feed back in. And then once we've got that nailed, we can then know we can go into build. Design sprint typically look like this. So the book defined this 5-day process of getting the client in the office for a few days and map out the problem, sketch ideas around a solution to that problem, decide which one you're going to do, prototype it, and then test it. Now, getting a client in a room for 5 days is quite a big task. So thought, okay, well, we don't need the client around for the last two things. They'll probably get in the way when we're prototyping anyway. They don't have to observe the test. We can show them video afterwards. So they whittled it down to 3 days getting the client for. And then some smart cookies in the design sprint space have suggested this kind of 2.0 version where, you know, we can probably squash some of these activities together and move them around a little bit. So we kind of map out the problem and sketch solutions on day 1 with the client. Day 2, we then decide what we're going to do and define it. So then on day 3 and 4, we can go away and prototype and test it, which frees up the week a little bit. So we get Fridays back, and we also only have to have the client in the room for 2 days, which is a much easier ask. The sprint team should typically consist of a range of people. So obviously I'm in there as the designer, and typically the designer might be facilitating that session, and then we have a broad range of people on the client side, but the key one here is having an engineer involved too. So obviously with engineers in the room, they get to see firsthand the discussions that happen with the client, rather than, you know, that happening with design, then design handing over or chucking that hand grenade over the fence, as Kultar referred to, and maybe not necessarily understanding some of the rationale behind design decisions and so on. So with all of that, in that first week, the goal for that week is essentially to get everyone in that room together, and we decide on a challenge to tackle, and we do that together. And that's the underlying thing through this. All of these activities are done together. We ideate on a solution to that challenge, and then we test that solution with a prototype. Now, this particular example that I'm going to take you through, our client had a web-based service that they wanted to try and replace with an app for a number of reasons, including customer demand, but also there was a desire to utilize you know, push notifications, biometric logins, and those general conveniences that come with a native mobile app. So they wanted to build a business case, basically, to seek out the budget to build this thing. And as it was an existing service, there are there's a certain level of feature maturity in that service. So we needed to test as much of those things as we could to work towards a minimum marketable product, because there was a fear that the MVP process, the minimum viable product process, might filter out or water down some of those features and essentially make it difficult for adoption when they come to validate the app. So we tweaked this goal for the week, and basically step 3 was to just build a prototype of that solution and then check back in with the client to see, is this what we got to in the workshop, and just kind of get a nod for them moving on to the next step. And this is where we kind of hacked the design sprint, you know, into something a bit more. So we've got 4 days design sprint, essentially gives you one feature. So in that 2 days in the workshop, you can kind of come up with a feature, and I'm going to talk through that process in a moment. But then we also had 3 further feature sprints, which essentially gives us 3 extra features to put into that prototype too. Now, I'm a designer. I'm you know, experienced design-based designer, so I don't like the term feature, because things shouldn't be feature driven, right? They should be based around a user need. But in this instance, we're looking at an existing service which contains features that were originally born out of feature needs anyway, right? So but if anybody has got a better term than feature sprint, please let me know in the chat, and I've got a Mars bar here for the best suggestion. So what does those next 3 to 4 weeks look like? Well, we're essentially going to define what those extra features are, but we would already have done that in the design sprint. Again, I'm going to show you that in a moment. We essentially build out a fuller prototype, so not just a prototype with one feature. Essentially, it's got, you know, 3 or 4 or more features in it, and then we want to take that fuller prototype and test that with real users. So then the output of that can feed into building the business case, so hopefully they can go and get some more money so they can build the thing with us. So just a quick whistle-stop tour of that design sprint process. So on day 1, we go into a room with the client, and the sponsor or the project lead on the client side sort of starts talking through why we're here, why we're doing this. And during that process, we start capturing lots and lots of problems as they're as people hear those problems, they scribble them down on notice board, on post-it notes, and stick them up on the wall. So, things like, it takes customers take a trial, but they don't commit to a subscription. We don't get many people booked on our webinars. The help desk has 30-minute wait times and so on. So they're hearing all these problems, and they stick these all up on the wall. And then we go with a limited number of little red sticky dots, and we vote on those. So just let all that load. Took me ages to get those sequenced. So then when we've got all these prioritized problems, we can then look at reframing these problems. And there's an activity called How Might We? So we take the highest rated problems. In this case, we don't get many people booked on our webinars. So we turn that into a question. How might we solve this thing? So we just turn it around basically and say, how might we increase the number of signups to our webinars? And on this other example, how might we get more people to subscribe after their trial, right? So it's just reframing the problem into a question that we can then start thinking about a solution to. So when we've done that, we then do a long-term goal activity where we just ask everybody in the room to come up with a long-term goal for this piece of work. In 2 years' time, what would you want to achieve? We then put them up on the wall and we vote for those. And then once we've voted for those, we then go into some what we call sprint questions. So we've got this long-term goal. Now we want to think about the things that could get in the way of us achieving that goal. So if and this can come back from some of those problems that came up. So in this case, there was there's 30-minute help desk 30-minute wait times on the help desk. So the question could be like, can we replace the need for that help desk, right? If we can build a digital solution that reduces that impact and on the call center, then that could help us get towards that goal. Another example is customers are losing trust in us. So can we build trust and confidence in our customers? So then these again, we put these up and vote on them to get the top 3 can we questions or sprint questions. So we have a goal that we can work towards, and then we have what we consider the most important challenges that might get in our way. So every time we do something over the next 2 days, we can refer back to these sprint questions and say, are we answering this? Is this piece of work building trust or confidence in our customers, and so on. So it just gives us a bit of focus and something to work towards. We then break for lunch, and then after lunch we have this session called Lightning Demos, which before the session we've given them some homework just to come to the session with some ideas about things they like. So maybe it's another app similar to what we're doing that they use, or maybe there's something on Amazon that they like, or I don't know if you can see there, but somebody liked Barclays banking app, so there was a whole load of stuff there. So we just put these up on the wall. So we're starting to get inspiration for things that we could probably combine into ways of solving those problems. Then they go into the afternoon, then sort of one exercise spills into the other. So they go around making notes of the problems and the things that we've captured so far on the wall. That then turns into doodling, because they're probably starting to get some ideas now. So they're starting to scribble things down on paper and sketch out little bits and pieces. That moves into concept sketching, where we're starting to think, okay, well, what does a couple of screens look like to solve this thing? And then we get to the end of the day where everyone has basically produced a number of concepts that we stick up on the wall. Then we go off and have a night off and a couple of beers and relax, because it's a pretty intense day. And then the next morning we come in and we vote on those concepts. So everyone goes round and has a look round and starts putting some sticky dots on to show their interest in certain things. And then ultimately we have a vote and we decide on which concept we're going to take forward as a group. So this is really good because obviously the engineers involved and the engineers getting to see this, but the most important thing is the client alignment. The client has told us what they want to do. They've come up with the ideas. They voted on the thing that we're moving forward. So we've got it takes away that kind of design rationale and design feedback to the client that we have to think about all the time, because they're steering this, right? So it's super good, super useful. Once we've got that concept, we move into user flows. So what does the user flow of this concept look like? We probably know what the first step is. and we probably know what the last step is, right? But what are the steps in between? How do they get from A to B to complete their journey through this concept? And everybody has a go, and everybody sticks their flow up on the wall, and then we go through each one. Kind of, it's a bit like a vote, but it's more a case of picking the best bits and defining. So we refine it down to an agreed journey that we can then take to the storyboarding activities. So excuse my poor, I'm a designer, but I've got really rubbish drawing skills. You can see here there's a picture of a phone, then that second picture suggesting a kind of biometric, open your phone type stuff, and then what do those few screens look like? And then that's the end of day 2, right? So we've got everything we need, or rather I need, to go away and prototype that thing. So the next day I go away, and with the help of a pretty decent UI kit in Figma, I can drag and drop those components quickly, and at the end of day 1 I can have a prototype for that thing in Figma, which we can then hand over to our developers, of which in this project we had 2. One of them was present on the day in that workshop. So far he's had exposure to all of this, and then they're now seeing screens that they need to build out. So they start doing that, and the screens are built out and served through. There's an app simulator called Expo Go. I don't know too much about it. That's a bit too nerdy for me. It's a developer thing, but essentially they're building out a prototype through this that can be used on either Android or iPhone. So what we're getting here is the opportunity to flex our development muscle as well as our creative muscle, and gets the client pretty excited. So and as I say, we were kind of working over, instead of 4 days, we stretched this out to like 4 weeks. So we're kind of doing a sort of mini sprint every week, if you like. And that next, I mentioned earlier, that feature sprint kind of looks a little bit like this. So we go back and explore the next feature. Now we've already prioritized these, because if you remember, we did those problems that we voted on. So we kind of know what the next feature is already. We just take the next voted feature and we work that up. Yeah, and the beauty of this is designers and developers working together, participating in all of the client-facing activities together. They're listening, participating, understanding the client and the problem space firsthand, and then solutionizing and problem solving together. So working very closely with each other. And whilst it's not sustainable to work at this pace for a whole number of reasons, right? I'm an experienced designer. I'm UX research is one of my strengths. I want to speak to users. I want to do research before I start designing and building a thing. So it kind of goes against that methodology. But what this is really good for is kicking off a project, right? The client's always got a ton of ideas. It helps us get them out of the client. But ultimately, it creates an environment for the designer and developer to work a bit more hand in hand, right? So, and as I say, you get that opportunity to flex the design muscle as well as the creative muscle to really impress the client. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
Is it?
Thanks, Sean. Yeah.
I can't see the chat, so I'll just stop sharing and try and find you guys again. There you go. And I'll just stop sharing. I was very conscious that might take an hour to get through, so I tried to rattle through it as quickly as I can. And I hope it was understandable. And I don't know if anybody else has done design sprints, but yeah, interesting to hear any thoughts or comments.
Yeah, is there any questions? Or go for it, James.
Yeah, that was great. I've heard design sprints a lot and never actually kind of seen the process laid out. So I quite liked the sort of like breakneck speed, because it allowed me to almost experience a design sprint there and then. But yeah, I guess my only kind of the thing that was popping into my mind was I can definitely see that in an agency environment. I mean, that is just like tailor-made to that discovery process, just getting the client in the room, getting them excited about things. But have you ever applied that in a non-agency environment where
absolutely.
you're working in like a product team and you're either trying to innovate, or you're taking something existing and you want to build like a really great, I know you don't like it, but feature, you know, so something to really kind of accelerate the product. Have you got any sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would probably say it's more common in-house product teams and internally than it is in agency world. But you're right. I mean, this is something we've tried recently. I've run dozens of design sprints, and I say most of those have been when I've worked in-house with a client. This particular example is, I mean, I don't know what went before me at MMT, but I you know, this is probably the first time we've run a design sprint like this, and obviously we've hacked it to be a bit more than a design sprint too. But there's been a ton of interest, you know, particularly around new biz, because you know, absolutely, this is a wonderful thing to sell, because it, you know, it impresses the client to work at that pace. It's not, when I say it's not healthy in terms of, you know, for working at that pace, in terms of you're not getting the opportunity to do the things that you probably want to do, like, you know, spend time doing the research first. But if you do think about those times when you know, the examples you were giving, you know, if you're working on a product in house and you've got new features, or you know there's something you want to put in, this is absolute opportunity to try that, because you can, there's nothing wrong with lean. What I don't like about lean is that that circle often never closes. You launch it and then it's done, right? You don't come back and iterate. That's the problem I have with lean. But if you follow this properly, then you are closing that circle, and you are using user feedback, right? Because that prototyping testing day that you would normally do on day 4, and ultimately, when at the end of this process, when we test the prototype with real people, we're testing it with real people, and we know the audience as well. This is a product we've worked on. So I guess if you work in-house on a product, you're probably going to have some familiarity with your audience already, right? And would have done an amount of research that kind of puts you in a position. But yeah, you know, I'm not saying it's the answer to everything, absolutely not. But we should all try different ways of working often, right? Because, you know, there is, the nature of this meetup and the topic just goes to prove that, you know, I'm getting close to 30 years in digital now, and we're still talking about the designer and developer relationship, right? So, you know, yeah, there is no right or wrong answer. I don't think it's yeah.
Awesome, great insights.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions? If not, thanks, Sean. That was really good.
Thank you.
Informative as well. So next up is Dominika. Just let us know when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. I was listening eagerly to all of your great talks and almost forgot I'm going to talk as well. So let me share my slides. I believe you can see them now. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. So all good. So yeah, like hi again. I actually now would like to talk a bit about the researcher's perspective, because I want to dive into some crucial aspects of creating effective collaboration between UX researchers and developers. And at Kontent.ai, where I'm coming from, we've come to understand that bridging the gap between these two teams is essential for delivering seamless and user-centered products. But before I go into detail, let me tell you a bit about myself. As I said, I currently work at Kontent.ai as a UX researcher, and with several years of experience in this field, I've witnessed firsthand how, let's call it, harmonious relationship between researchers and developers can elevate the user experience to new heights. So that's why I would like to share it with you today. And since many of you mentioned having kids, I should add that I'm a proud cat mom. It's not related, but I just like to talk about it. And I really like Breaking Bad, And like, by the way, if Walter is a developer and Jesse is a designer, I was wondering who from Breaking Bad would actually represent researchers. Not sure about that. Maybe I came up with Badger or Skinny Pete, as they are the closest to Jesse as designer, but yeah, that's just something I was wondering about. Anyway, during this presentation, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat anytime or anywhere else. And now let me start with breaking down the user research lifecycle just briefly. So in Kontent.ai, it starts with preparation, where we carefully plan the research, we define goals, formulate questions, and select suitable methods. And once the groundwork is laid, we execute the research. No surprises there. Collecting relevant data through observations, interviews, and more. The next phase involves data analysis, in which we glean insights and draw conclusions. So this life cycle actually centers our process around user-focused design. So while we actually involve developers in the preparation phase of UX research, let me talk about the advantages of this collaborative approach. So our UX research lifecycle kicks off with a meeting during which we define our goals and research questions. As I mentioned, subsequently, we define our methods and collect feedback on the research plan, including input from developers. I would say that one unique aspect of our approach is involving developers this early on. Sometimes our developers even say that we only need them for what they call technical research. However, I personally think that their presence is essential during this phase for all types of research. That's why I would want to talk about first tangible benefit of involving developers early on, and that is the technical accuracy. Because with developers understanding our product's intricacies, it ensures that our research materials truly represent the product's functionality and behavior. And I would say that this accuracy in turn leads to more realistic research outcomes and valuable user feedback. Here you can see our research plan template. Like I said, we welcome feedback from developers on every part of it, including reviewing the prototype, looking over the scenarios, the usability, the scenarios for usability testing sessions, and sometimes they even suggest some knowledgeable research participants to include. So that's actually pretty cool. Another benefit is definitely early issue identification, which carries through pilot interview or testing. Because in my opinion, developers' involvement plays a crucial role in identifying technical glitches, some usability hiccups or unexpected behaviors. So in doing so, we significantly reduce the likelihood of encountering some major roadblocks during actual research sessions. Because these issues, from my experience, might not be immediately obvious to UX researchers or even UX designers alone, making this input super important. And lastly, as it was already mentioned during all of the previous talks, collaboration is key. I believe that involving developers fosters a collaborative environment that actually rewards cross-team communication. And this coordination enriches our understanding of user needs and technical considerations, resulting in more impactful research outcomes. Here, you can actually see an example of more technical research where we truly needed developers involved right from the beginning. I must admit, when I first look at this, it was a bit intimidating to me. Like the first time I heard about API keys, I was like, wow, I would really need some technical persona to help me with that. So in conclusion, through involving developers in the preparation phase, we magnify technical accuracy, prevent future issues, streamline processes, and I would say foster collaboration. Even more often, we actually involve developers in the execution phase. We basically involve them every time we execute some research. Having them present is a must for us, and we are incredibly appreciative that they are eager to be involved, as it makes things so much easier. And I know that it's not the case in like every company. So I feel very lucky. The execution phase includes participant recruitment and data collection, which can involve interviews, usability tests, and more. Again, developers bring valuable technical insights to the table during research sessions. Their perspectives help identify usability issues and constraints that might impact the user experience. And this collaboration definitely enriches our understanding of the user journey. Because to be honest, as a UX researcher, I don't approach interviews as someone who is highly tech savvy. I'm not really coming there to like flex with my knowledge. Instead, I come in as someone seeking answers, aiming to understand our users better. And I actually think that it would be a stretch to label myself as tech savvy, which on one hand is an advantage. It allows me to ask what might seem like simple questions or silly questions that can uncover deep-rooted user problems. On the other hand, our research participants often have technical questions of their own, and our developers can provide better answers than I can. That's for sure. So having them on a research call is very important for me. And I actually believe, or I like to believe, that being on a research call is useful to developers too. For some of them in my company, it's the first time they actually see user interactions. So I discussed it with our developers, this whole topic, and I found it impressive that they make an effort to ensure everyone from their team can attend a research session to provide that experience. I think that direct observation of real users interacting with the product is a pretty unique opportunity that deepens their understanding of how their code translates into real user experiences. Additionally, involving developers provides them with what I call contextual understanding of users' behaviors, needs, and challenges. And this first-hand insight might inform their coding decisions, improving product quality that truly resonates with our users. In the picture, you see our usual group present on research calls. You already know me. I'm the UX researcher. It's not the most flattering picture of me, but I try the others to make look good, so that's all right. You know Ilesh, who was actually a research participant in this case and served as an expert. And then we have our UX designer and a developer. And I believe that this collaboration style is the best. Speaking of collaboration, let me move to the next slide. So during our interviews or testing sessions, everyone can take notes on what they observed, what they found interesting or surprising. They use these online post-its in Figma, and we discuss them after the call. Because following every research call, we actually have a short meeting to share our impressions and discuss next steps. And I believe, or I witness, that greatly contributes to better communication, that we are on the same page with developers, with designers. Because I think that with a clear understanding of users' conceptions of and interactions with the prototype, developers can communicate effectively with design and research teams and vice versa, contributing to informed decision-making. So as I shift to the data analysis phase, involving both researchers and developers continues to generate substantial benefits. Let me talk about how. So in this phase, we analyze and interpret the collected data. No surprises there. We also present the report and discuss recommendations and next steps, including with developers. In this phase, developers provide technical insights once again by offering a technical perspective on the feasibility of proposed changes based on our analysis. Their input, I would say, ensures the improvements are both user-centered and technically feasible. And here in the picture, you can actually see a portion of a data analysis conducted by one of our developers. I'm not gonna lie, this isn't a common practice, but for this highly technical research, it made a lot of sense and proved to be invaluable. And it was actually quite exciting to like watch our developer analyzing data and doing like what we do and actually being able to do that. So that was nice. Developers also play a role in suggesting realistic solutions. Their knowledge of the technical architecture ensures that enhancements align with the current framework, resulting in practical and achievable improvements. That's why we want to hear from them in every research findings presentation session. And this is what, to me, constitutes collaborative decision-making. And yeah, I believe collaborative decision-making is super important. I think that the developers' input actually bridges the gap between design, research, and development teams, fostering more informed decisions that consider both user experience and technical implementation. Because in general, I would say that research is necessarily based on teamwork, and I think that this cooperation is a great example of that. And yeah, so for the very enthusiastic and passionately curious, we actually in Kontent.ai we have educational research workshops. Many of our developers have even participated in them, even though it's like voluntary. You don't have to, you're not forced to, but you can. These workshops cover research basics, how to ask questions correctly, and cognitive biases. Particularly the How to Ask Questions Correctly workshop, which in part addresses not asking leading questions, has been described by our developers as very useful and especially relevant when asking follow-up questions during research sessions. So for me, this is the best kind of feedback, I would say. And that would actually be all from me for today, but please feel free to reach out if you got any questions or want to chat more about this cool world of UX research and development. And thank you very much for having me.
That's great. Thank you, Dominika. Any questions for her? If not, I can ask a question. So I guess like you've gone through, and one of the great things that from all of our sessions is the collaborative approach between developers and designers. There's no sort of bridge. It's basically togetherness. But do you find like when it comes to suggestions of improvements to, in this case, your product, do you find sometimes the suggestions are too far out or something that you may have totally missed because it was just something that you probably just didn't consider?
You mean suggestions from developers?
Yeah.
I actually sometimes find my suggestions to be a little too far off, to be honest. That I need someone to ground me a little bit. I really need developers to kind of tell me or to tell the designers, well, this is not realistic. No, I actually find their suggestions like really like grounded or like based on some like Yeah, not just like random. Yeah, that's my experience. But maybe I underestimate myself. Maybe our suggestions are also good, but I'm more thinking about me, like suggesting things that are a little bit unrealistic. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions for anybody? If not, I think that's great. Just want to really thank everyone for attending and all the speakers here today. Great session, and what will happen is I'll share the recording out hopefully later on tonight, but maybe tomorrow. Let's not time box that too much. But yeah, just really want to thank everyone, and hope to see you guys soon, and look out for the next session. Really, yeah. Thank you.